If not, then I think we move forward to, I would say, Benoit. I will give you the floor first, Benoit, to pick up from where Paddy left. And when Paddy comes back, if he comes back, then we will allow Paddy to finish the point he was making. Benoit, you have visited Nagorno-Karabagh often, and you are speaking about the ethnic cleansing in Nagorno-Karabagh, and what you say is the guilty silence of the international community. I think that picks up right from where Paddy left us. And after that, I'll go to Kokop and Sally. Benoit, the floor is yours, and thank you so much for being there.
Okay. Do you previously want to hear somebody else? Because I was still preparing myself. I can wait for 15 minutes if necessary, but I can also speak now.
You can speak now, Benoit.
Okay, dear colleagues, dear friends and dear guests, I want to address you today about a that was strongly condemned by several international law courts, but nevertheless was not stopped nor winded back. It is the ethnic cleansing of Nagorno-Karabakh from its Armenian population. It's a recent fact. It's a fact from the end of September 2023. It's just a little bit more than a year ago. I don't have the time here to elaborate that Nagorno-Karabakh, the Upper Highlands, were an Armenian homeland since more than 2 millennia. Around 180 BC, Artsakh, as the Armenians call it, became one of the 15 provinces of the Armenian kingdom. And that Armenian kingdom was the first nation in the world to adopt Christianity as a state religion in the beginning of the 4th century, some 10 years before the Emperor Constantine allowed belief in the Roman Empire. Nagorno-Karabakh has been an Armenian homeland from the beginning of our Christian time to the beginning of the 20th century. It has been independent as a part of Armenia or autonomous under the rule of the Caesars in Moscow, or for a small period of rulers in Poland, Lithuania, but always an independent Christian state. It was Joseph Stalin, who at that time was not the leader of the Soviet Union. He would become it a few years later. He was responsible for the diversity in the periphery of the new Soviet Federation. It was Joseph Stalin who decided to create a Soviet Republic Armenia and the Soviet Republic Azerbaijan in the 20s, and who decided to allow the Azeri rulers to have that Nagorno-Karabakh, although some 3 years later, he stipulated again that Nagorno-Karabakh had to be an independent Christian oblast within the borders of the Soviet Republic of Azerbaijan. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the international community decided that all the different Soviet republics gained their independence. Like, for example, Ukraine, we are talking a lot about it last months and years. but not the autonomous parts of some Soviet republics that made the problem in Transnistria, for Moldavia, in some parts of Georgia, and also the problem for Nagorno-Karabagh, that then became part of Azerbaijan and not longer connected to Armenia, the Christian republic that was established in the early 90s, just in the neighborhood. And then occurred two wars. And I have to be honest, in the first war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, Armenia was the aggressor and wanted to get back, to regain that Nagorno-Karabagh, and also committed some ethnic atrocities in some villages and cities that were in which Azeris lived. It was then the defeat of Azerbaijan in 1994 that permitted to a family, Aliyev, to take over the power in Azerbaijan. It is the family that is still in power in Baku. A relentless dictator, Ilam Aliyev Aliyev. And 2 years ago, he started a new war against Armenia, stronger now, a new war, the 44 days war that Azerbaijan won, and at the end of which he could take over the parts of the country that the Armenians had gained as a buffer zone around Nagorno-Karabagh in 1991. After that 44 days war, a peace agreement was signed under the auspices of Vladimir Putin, at that time president of the Russian Federation, and not at war as it is since September 2022 in Ukraine. A peace agreement was signed, and there was stipulated that Artsakh could remain in quasi-independent. It was part of Azerbaijan, but had its own parliament, its own government, its own legislation. It was autonomous. And there was one corridor between Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabagh, and Armenia. The Lachin corridor in the mountains between Goris and Stepanakert. And it was said that Moscow, with peacekeepers, had to cut that corridor open. And then started the problem in December 2022. Suddenly, Azerbaijan closed the Lachin corridor under a pretext of environmental activists, an activism for mine questions more than 100 miles away. So it was a pretext, of course. And for 9 months, the Lachin corridor was closed, and the 120,000 Armenian people in Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabagh, were totally from the rest of the world, without necessary food, without necessary medical supply. Even the Red Cross could not always pass through the Lachin corridor. And the discussions before international courts began. And La Hague stipulated in February 23 that the Lachin corridor had to be opened for all population of Artsakh in both sides. It was stipulated in La Hague in February 23. I was there on that February 26th, 23. I had the stipulation of the international course in my hands, and they let not go through, nor me at one side, nor the Armenians at the other side. And then, so, end of September 23, the Azeri attacked Stepanakert, and the population of Artsakh, that was isolated from the world since 9 months, started massively to flee Artsakh to Armenia. More than 120,000 refugees are in Armenia now. Several international courts have stipulated that they have to be allowed to return to their homelands, that they have to live in security in Nagorno-Karabagh. UNESCO have stipulated, the European Parliament has stipulated that the cultural heritage of the Armenians in Stepanakert and the surroundings have to be protected. It is not. Azeris are systematically razing 2,000 churches, monasteries, depraving graves, monuments are transformed in mosques or in Albanian church. The Albanian church is a little church that existed in the 4th century and was close to the Georgian church. There is a small Albanian church in Baku, but there was never an Albanian presence in Nagorno-Karabakh. It's a lie. It's a state lie by Azerbaijan. What's my problem now? Is this Azerbaijan condemned by international community? Yes. But is it boycotted by the international political community? Not at all. During the blockade of the Lasin corridor, Ms. Ursula von der Leyen went to Baku and called Mr. Aliyev our new trustful ally, because she was able there to sign some contracts about petrol and gas. Even not Azeri gas. Specialists are convinced that it is Russian gas that we boycott, but that we buy from Azerbaijan, where it is labeled as Azeri gas. Von der Leyen is going there. We were all there a few weeks ago for the COP29, in a state where pupils at school learn at the age of 8 that the most patriotic deed they can do in their lives is to kill an Armenian. Armenians that are always called Armenian dogs. I can assure you the Azeri propaganda in the school books, on television, broadcasted in the speeches of the president and other responsibles of the Azerbaijan state is worse, is absolutely worse than the propaganda of the Nazis before the Second World War. The Armenians are always called animals, not to be trusted, etc. The president of Azerbaijan is even saying that Yerevan, the actual capital of Armenia, is in fact an Azeri city. And he don't hide that he wants to go further. And he did. He did. There were attacks even to parts of Armenia that were never contested. The attack to Jermuk in the end of 23. Some enclaves in the north of Armenia that are now taken by Azerbaijan. I was a year ago next to a little church of the 7th century. I might have been the last one who have seen it. It has been erased from the ground. So my point is, what about international law courts, as that of the European Organization for Security? Azerbaijan is a member of that as an organization. Azerbaijan is a member state accepting the Court of La Hague. What is such a court if condemnations, arrests, stipulations of such courts are not to be implemented? And what is our so-called democratic international community if she does not use her power, soft power, but also harder power by boycotting countries to international condemnations of such an ethnic cleansing to make them being addressed on the ground. We, even the Europeans, have some 100 armed soldiers in the region. They were in Georgia. We brought them to Goris at the end of the Lachin corridor. But further off, some symbolic gestures, we do nothing with the international judicial condemnation of this ethnic cleansing. What is international law nowadays if nobody takes the necessary steps to implement it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benoit. That was very clear, and thank you for bringing some light on ethnic cleansing that we really hear absolutely nothing about in the media.